Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this SGVirtual, our second one in March. It's our last in winter because spring is starting this weekend or a little bit later. So it's our last SGVirtual in winter. And we are pleased to have Leo BENKEL with us. Hi, Leo.
Hi.
And just a few housekeeping notes. Your questions, shoot them in the chat. I will pick them up and then let them flow into our discussion, my discussion with Leo. Afterwards, if you like, you can join us in the networking part there. So it's up to you. But now, please stay with us here on the main stage. And I would just like to thank our partners who are supporting us. And yeah, that's it. So without further ado, Leo, how are you today?
All good. How are you doing? The weather is a bit weird lately. It's like changing from storm to sunny to cloudy. It's really interesting.
So welcome to the mainland Europe, especially Luxembourg, April weather.
Yeah. I haven't experienced season in a while.
So Leo, just let's really dig into it. That's why our attendees, our grinders are there. Is Silicon Valley. How did you cut to Silicon Valley? What made you go to Silicon Valley? What was it?
So since a very young age, I've always been into computers, and when I was looking at movies and like the magazines and the scientific articles, it's always about San Francisco, Silicon Valley, where the future is built. So I've always wanted to be there. So I prepared my journey to, if any opportunity opened, I'll be able to jump on it. And so I went to engineering school. I did all my internship abroad so I could learn English because I was absolutely terrible. I was born in France and I didn't speak English whatsoever. So I went to different, I did all my internship through my engineering school in foreign countries so I could practice my English. And I got extremely lucky to have a family friend opening a company in San Francisco. And I was like, can you take me as an intern? And they were like, we don't really take interns. You can come for, a few weeks and see if it works. But my internship was for 4 months. And if you don't complete it, you fail the entire year and you have to redo the entire year. So it was really stressful to be like, do I do that and risk on failing my entire year? That means repaying the scholarships. That means redoing an entire year of the same classes over. And I was like, sure, let's do it. and within the first months, I optimized one of the algorithms. So they were like, okay, we can keep you.
So that means your acquaintance, they were already in the technology business. So,
they were like a small company, 12 people, building a brand new server client protocol to do remote desktop. And I didn't know anything about this field. I was just like, hello, my first internship.
And how was it? I mean, have you been the small company? I guess it was then the startup mentality we all see in the movies, in the books, and so on.
So there were like a lot of culture clash. Like, for instance, I remember my first day, I went and shake everyone's hands, and everybody was like, "What are you doing?" Like in San Francisco, you just say hi and you sit down, and I mean, sometimes you don't even say hi. You just like go funnel to your computer and that's it. And they were also like the agile methodology. So every morning we had a stand-up where everybody talks about what they were doing, and it was everything in English. Like I felt like my nose would bleed, after like so much English and having to process not only new concepts but the language. And the first like few weeks were really hard, but then it started kicking in. You get the rhythm of things. But it's really fun to be with people with amazing background. One of our lead engineer was from NASA. The other one like from all those like fancy, crazy places with amazing background. And it's all about the technology. Like at the beginning, they were not even sales or marketing or nothing. It's just engineering, building technology. And that was really, really cool.
And the other thing is, I mean, you told already, but have you been the only exotic mainland Europe person, or have there been other cultures? Because you have addressed the culture part. there been other cultures in?
So in my very first job in this internship, most of the people were American or people that has been in the US for a very long time. But later on, when I settled in San Francisco and got to work at different companies, I really got the culture of San Francisco. Like just walking a few blocks, you hear 10 different languages, immigrants from all around the globe. You work with people from China, India, Europe, Eastern Europe, South America. You have contractors in Africa or Asia. It's you have calls that you see people's background where they're in the middle of rainforest and you're in your office. It's crazy.
And how was it? I mean, I remember my first internship. I mean, it's more in the European side. It was more on the European culture. It was really, okay, you can do this little bit, and you didn't have any responsibility, and the freedom was also very small. How was it there for your first part?
So when I went in my first engineering years, and I went to Poland as an intern, I went to Greece as an intern, and that was exactly what you described. I had one little job, and that's it. It was not bringing coffee, but clothes. But in this case, it was very unique because the company was so small. They were 8 to 12 people when I arrived, and so everybody needed to work. Otherwise, the company wouldn't have been able to succeed. So I was not considered an intern. I was here's the project, go for it. Oh. And that's why they sent me this email at the beginning, even before I joined. They were if you can't put it through, we can't keep you because we don't have the money or any of the resources to not only keep someone coming from Europe, because there's a lot of lawyer and paperwork that has to be done, but also they paid for my rent because I just arrived for a few months. And so there were a lot of resources. It was a paid internship, and so they wanted me to be an engineer. And I think they were really impressed. And I came back the year after. So that was 4 months. I came back the year after for 6 months. And during those 6 months, they were well, you're hired. We're going to work on your working visa. And so for those 6 months, basically, they were working on this working visa. And then I just came back to France for a month, pick up my degree of my engineering school and my visa, and went back to San Francisco. And that was the start of my 10 years adventure there.
And when you came back, I mean, you went back to the same company, you assisted them in developing it. Did you witness how the company evolved?
So when I joined as an intern, we were 12 people. By the time we got acquired, we were 60. We had to move office. It was actually very interesting because since we were so small, everybody participated. I remember we had to go on the weekend to assemble the desk and build up the office, and then we started hiring people. There were new people coming in, and I was able to witness the onboarding process, the hiring process, how people are how the culture is being assembled with those new people coming every day. So we almost tripled in size by the time within those 2 years I stayed with them, and at the end of the 2 years we got acquired.
Mm-hmm. And how was that in the culture part? I mean, because I pick it up because you touched upon it during when you arrived, and that was something which really marked you. And as the company evolved, grew, got acquired, and so on, how did they deal with the culture? To have the cultural fit, and also to keep the corporate culture, or if you may say.
Mm-hmm. I think to answer this question, it's better to move forward to the next company I worked at, which was Samtac. And so after the acquisition, so I'll just go quickly, we can come back later. But so we got acquired, and that was amazing to be part of the due diligence process. We can dive deeper afterward. And then we got acquired by Citric, which I went from a startup 12 people to a 10,000, elephant that moves slowly. So we can dive deeper as well into that. And then I went to Samtac, and I think here, that's where I can answer the question the best, because I started, we were 100, and we grew to 600, moved offices as well. And so there, in 2 years, you multiply by 6 the employee workforce. And that was very interesting, how everything needs to keep together. So for instance, one of the tricks is to have mentees. So when someone gets hired, you get a mentor that's not in your department. So you keep cohesion within the enterprise. You would have someone in sales or someone in recruiting. And so everybody can keep together. You also have events You eat together. They were like when we moved offices, we had a full staff kitchen inside the office. So you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, and you have like events. There's like off sites where you go with the entire company. And we went on Angel Island for hikes at like a barbecue. So it's really about like putting people together on the common goals. And as you hire more people, is make sure they are not lost. Like you want them to have a friend day one. You want even before day one, you can get meetings with them with a new hire before they enter the workforce. So you can tell them the tricks, who to ask for what, and I think when you spend time in a company, the main thing we acquire is knowing who to talk to for specific subject. And so when you start in a new company, if someone tells you all this information, you can start being productive right away.
Mm-hmm. You just touched upon this elephant before. Yeah. How did you live that from coming really from an agile like beast, moving to an elephant? And was that eventually something which pushed you to move further?
For me, it was awesome because I still work with the core team of my previous startup. So we still had like an agile little bubble in the middle of this like goo where nothing is moving. When you produce code, it has to go through so many validation steps because the main customers of Citrix, are big banks and insurance. And so the customers were using, I don't remember exactly, but it's like something like they were using version 3 when we were releasing version 9. So the code you write will never be used for the next 10 years. And it was really like, it's like, what am I even doing? Mm-hmm. And so when they decided to close the office of San Francisco to regroup in Florida, they asked us to move to Florida, but we're like, no thanks. Mm-hmm. So we stayed in California, and I found a new job, and I really wanted to find a new job in a small companies because I like this agile, like fast pace, and that's when I joined Sumtech. Mm-hmm. It was also very stressful because I didn't have my green card yet, so I only had like a few months to find a new job or I get deported, and so that was really, really intense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the other hand, this means if you look a little bit back to it, what would you recommend eventually to companies who are starting to develop themselves and really starting from a small core team to a bigger company where you also have either to get this culture, the corporate culture, or how you may call it, through? And on the other hand, okay, you have to adapt to your customers because you are getting more valuable for your customers, so they rely more on you. And then, of course, you have more, let's call it security issues, let's call it like that.
And I experienced the security issue because I was part of the due diligence when we got acquired. And also at another company, we acquired a company. And so I was part of both sides of the due diligence. And the code audit, the security audit, using like the right open source library with the right licenses, it can be a go no go decision. If you're using a library that put at risk the entire source code of the acquiring company, they're never gonna purchase your company. So there's like all those important little details that you don't think about when you're in like those fast-paced growth that end up being really important for your exit. And after this experience, every other company I joined, I was very frustrated to not have a say into like, guys, we should not do that. Trust me, I went through it. That's a bad decision to use that right now. and that's one of the aspects which made me want to create my company here in Luxembourg, where I'm the one that gives the recommendation on how to do the right things at the right time. Like you said, for the growth, how do you keep the growth of your company? And it's like this, I always try to think about like, when you attract user, at the same time, you also have to attract talents. And you have to be very like careful on your marketing strategy because you don't want the attraction of a user to hurt the attraction of your employees or those way around. So you have to show that you have a solid technical company that is attractive for employees. You have to propagate your value and your culture to the outside world. Your culture shouldn't just be inside your company. It has to grow with you and have like an aura, that will attract not only users but also talents. And I think that's one of the main driver to attract talents when you grow, without breaking your culture, because there is no transition phase between not being in the company and being in the company. People that comes to you already know about your culture and wants to be part of it.
Then getting to this, you got acquired part. I mean, what were there the, let's say, so what did you take out of it? To the acquirer, we come later, but now being in this small team who got acquired, how did you live that? How did the company live that phase? Because it must be quite intense, I guess.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley, there's this thing called acqui-hired. So what they wanted is the talent pool and the technology. They didn't care about, the business of the company. The only thing they cared about is taking this patent, this technology, and include it in their own product. So that's kind of what happened. They acquired the research team that I was part of, and asked us to help them integrate it with their product line. So we were kind of like this, highly skilled task force that just want to bring this technology on board.
So, and then if we move now to the other company, I mean, where you said, okay, you had to find something, was that also a company, this job, did you choose it, or did they come to you via your network you had established?
Yeah, so in San Francisco, it's crazy. When there's like several bars, right? You are junior up to 5 years, then like expert senior up to like after 10 years. And so you can, I'm sure I haven't done it, but the frequency of cold call from recruiters, and in Axis you put the years of experience, it's like growing exponentially. And so at this moment I was only like at the half of my, like I was like 5 years or so. So it was starting to get traction, like recruiters start calling you. But it was not like crazy. When I passed the 10 years bar, you get 3 to 10 like messages on LinkedIn per day. It's crazy. But so at this moment, I didn't really choose the company because I only had this very short amount of time with my green card. So I interviewed with a few companies. I had a few options, and I picked this one because it seems to be the coolest. But if I wanted to really spend the time, I think I would have chose something else, because I was really in like a research mode with this company. I was building new technologies. When I got hired at Suntech, the job was full stack engineer. So I worked in like front end, back end, database. So I worked on a little field, but it was a production line. I was building a product. I was not building a new breakthrough technology. And so to me, it was not as exciting. I learned a lot, but if I had the choice to choose a different company, I would have picked something which is more, R&D than just the production side.
And this company where you then got hired, the second company, if I understood well, is, you already touched a little bit upon it. Did you also have this feeling of freedom which you had before? I mean, because when one says this, not the American way of life, but the Silicon way of working, you have this freedom of working and doing your things. You have an objective, or you have a common vision, and everybody is going to it.
So it's like compartmentalized. There's our team was the growth team, and basically it's like user acquisition, user conversion, SEO, all of that. And the goal was to grow the user pool. And that's pretty much what the leadership tells the team. It's like, your goal is to grow the user pool. That's it. It doesn't tell you how to do it. And then the product managers, the designers, the engineers work together to achieve those goals by splitting the goals in pieces. So the first one is to user acquisition. How do you get more visitors to the platform? Then it's user conversion. How do you get those users and convert them into user? And so there's like all those tools and all those verticals that the team split like under this hierarchy. The leadership doesn't care how it's done as long as it's done. In this company, one of the things that I didn't enjoy, and I don't know if it changed since then. So I'm just speaking of my own experience. And it's something that I've learned that I don't like, is that I want to be able to be part of the decision process. At this company, when I was there at least, the product manager and the designer will work within themselves and then hand me the design. And I didn't have a lot of say into changing it afterward because the entire decision process was already done. And that's one of the things that really I remember from this job, is that I think engineers, I mean, I speak for myself, but extend it to like the other kind of engineers. I think we like to be part of the decision process because engineers have been trained at school and through their career to solve problems. And so if you just hand us the solution, it's not fun anymore. And I think that's kind of the thing like I want to teach with my company as well, is like tell the management, it's like, let the engineer find their solutions. That's the fun part of the job. So don't take it away from them.
Okay, that's interesting. And on the other hand, I mean, how was the leadership style? Would you say that the leadership style is also something which is important for the company and so on, and that they eventually do they have to be adapted or adaptive on different phases or stages of the company? What's your take on that?
I think it's more about the stratification and the number of teams. So in San Francisco, they really want to keep like a flat organization. If you want, at any time, you can just send a message on the Slack or Team or whatever platform for chat you use, and send a message to the founder and be like, hey, I have a question. Do you want to meet? And most of the time, the question is yes. The answer is yes. And you can meet with anybody of the layers. You don't have to, ask your manager to ask his manager to ask his manager to ask his manager. It's like most of the time, those management hierarchy don't have a desk. They just walk around the office, and you're like, oh, I have this idea, and you can just pitch it to them, at any time. And I've experienced that through all my jobs in San Francisco. It's always all the company I worked at where it's very open. You can talk to your manager, you can talk to his manager, you can talk to the manager above. Like it doesn't matter. It's like the more people communicate, the more ideas being created.
Then there is, I just had this, a question coming in now. It is, if you noticed differences between US and French engineering approaches. French, you may also replace it by mainland Europe approaches, styles and so on.
Yeah, there are like big differences, I think. So first of all, let me give you some introduction. One of my favorite field in computer science is called multi-agent system. So it's when you have like several agents, like they call like dumb agents. The code they embed is just a few lines. It's very, very simple. But the fact that there are a lot of them and that they interact create what's called emerging behaviors. And so, for instance, there's a fun example I like to tell. It's imagine you have those like termites, or they can be robots or whatever. And they have to pick up those items on the floor. You can imagine the pieces of wood. So the code is basically, if you see a piece of wood, put it on your back. If you see another piece of wood and you have one on your back, put it next to it. That's the only lines of code. It's like 3 lines. And at the end, after it runs a few iterations, you have only one stack of wood perfectly circular. And it's because of the surface of exchange between the stack, like the bigger one has more chance to be encountered in this world. And so they get bigger. And so that's the example of like very small rules that create emerging behavior. And so keeping that in mind, the big difference I noticed, for instance, one I was shocked about when I created my company here in Luxembourg, I had to sign a paper that says I'd never bankrupt. And so it's a simple rule. It's like, why not? But the consequences of this, the emerging behavior, means that people that have taken risk, that have learned, don't have a second chance. And that breaks the selection cycle, because what works in San Francisco is that there's like 300 companies created every day. And then 10 of them succeed a little more, and the 250 are just reshuffled, retried, and then you get a second generation. And then a few of them succeed, a few of them failed, and then you have a third generation and a fourth generation. And then you get better and better performance as people learn what didn't work so they can try again. So that's one of the biggest differences I've seen between the US and Europe, is like this risk-taking thing. The second one that for me was really, I already knew about it, but really struck me when I came back, is the hiring and firing process. Because it's so hard to hire and fire in Europe, so that's a simple rule, it's like very hard to hire and fire. The consequences of this emerging behavior is that companies, to solve this problem, hire a lot of freelancers. And because they hire a lot of freelancers, there is less ownership to the product. And when I apply to companies in the US, they tell me flat, it's like, we don't want contractors. We only hire full-time because we want people that owns what we build, because what we build is the most important things the company make. And they are able to only hire full-time people because you get a one-day notice when you get fired in San Francisco. It's like, oh, that's your last day today. Just leave me your laptop and goodbye. Usually you get like a severance package. You get like several months of paycheck as an output check, and that's it. But that allows you to be able to move forward. You have a few cash in the bank to be able to find a new job, and the company are not scared to hire you because, if you don't work out, they can fire you the next day. And I've seen here in Europe where people get a closing of contract notification sometimes 3 months ahead of time. But during those 3 months, you have zero motivation. It's the end. So why would you put any effort into what you're going to produce? So it's a waste of time for everyone. You can't find a new job during those 3 months. You're still making money, but you're working on things you don't want to work on anymore. It's like, it's very strange to me. But the consequences of the small things create big emerging behavior across the entire ecosystem.
That's right. And the other thing also is, if we look at all your experiences you had in Silicon Valley, how did they go about to scale their products or their services? Did they say, okay, we do it a little bit more, step by step?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there, in general, let's call it, if you put it in general, what is the approach of scaling products or going to the market or increasing the market?
I had the chance to work for companies that was B2B and companies that was B2C, and so it's already a different strategy altogether. And even in B2C, there is different fragmentation. If you start getting small businesses or big companies, the sales cycle is different. But I think the key answer is that things are being built to be scaled. So you don't build, the prototype is just a prototype, but then when you start building the real thing, you build it in mind that it's going to take over the world. So you build it on servers, on architectures that can triple and quintuple in volume easily. One metric that's very important is the cost of infrastructure per user. So you want that to not grow linearly. You want the curve to flatten out. So then as you grow more users, your costs don't raise in parallel to it. Otherwise, sometimes you expectedly don't want it to grow faster, and you don't want the cost to grow faster than the user. So you need to use the right technologies from the start that allow you to grow so that the cost of per user doesn't grow faster than your user. And if you achieve this, you can grow instantly. We saw Airbnb, they used what's called Blitz Scaling. It's like, there's a book on it. And basically they opened 10 offices in 10 different countries, hired 10,000 people in 6 months. But they can do it because not only is their technology scalable and the management is scalable. Because there is no micromanagement, you don't need a chain of operation down all the way to each individual engineers. You just give them the goal. It's like, I want your office to sign up 10,000 users in 6 months. Do it however you want, but that's the goal. And then they are independent. And then the higher management splits up the projects. Like, okay, we need to find hosts, we need to find customers. So they split that, and so they split up big goals into small goals. And the only thing that you have to report on is your one metric. It's like, as a maker, so my goal was to build this page, this platform by this week, and then it's done. And then you move to the next goal. And so what's really interesting with this system is that the KPIs, the metrics that's being measured for success is usually decided with the team. So you have this ownership. It's like, I picked this goal. I want to show that I picked a goal I can achieve. But at the same time, you also want the goal to be ambitious. So the rule of thumb is that you want to succeed 70% of the goals and fail 30% of them. If you succeed 100% of them, it was not ambitious enough. And if you succeed less than 70%, maybe it was a bit too harsh.
And then on the other hand, there's also a question coming in about the market. In the US, let's say US market, and then more European market, because the market size is also different. Did you feel that, let's call it Silicon Valley, I mean, we just generalize, is more focused on the US market, and then they think about going to other markets later? Or is it a little bit, are they immediately focused on, okay, let's go worldwide dominance? How
no, so there's a strategy to growth. I don't know if I'm sure you did. There's like this curve of user, you have the early adopters, the majority, and the late adopters. And there's this chasm between the early adopters and the majority. The goal is to find early adopters that are going to talk about your product to the rest of the population and bridge this chasm. So there are several strategies. You can either find if you have different categories of your product, you find a category that's very intense, involved people. They love this thing. But you have to make sure they talk to other people, because if they are just within themselves, this community won't help you bridge the chasm. Or you can find a specific location that those people are very well connected, and they are early adopters, and they will be able to talk about your project. So you basically need to find a seed where your network can grow from, and then your users become your own marketing team. But I think the advantage of the United States is that it's English speaking, and so then without changing any line of code, usually you can target Canada, Australia, UK. In Europe, it's a bit more complicated because of all the different languages that are blended together. So if you build an application, I don't know, in French, without changing the location, you're gonna have to target Quebec, or it's not as easy to scale when you don't plan the internationalization. And so there is one thing. It's about making sure your website can change the language, and that's not too hard. And you can start doing it at the very beginning. Even though you have one language, you can build the code, so it's easy to translate. But what's harder, and what blocks a lot of American company already, is like, if you have machine learning algorithms that treat about natural language processing, usually those are language based. So if you have an algorithm that works in English, it might not work in Spanish. And that can be a big blocker if you don't think about the language when you start building it. You might have to rebuild everything, or you're going to have not as happy users in a different language.
I see time is a little flying by, and there are also one or the other questions coming in. I just picked them up randomly and add a little bit my own twist around it. The other thing is, when you came back, have you felt a little, what was your impression coming back, I mean, from that environment to the more European environment? What was your impression? How did you
like on a specific topic or in general?
In general, really in general, from, let's say, either your personal side, from the business side, you notice, or when you approaching the business, a job market, or developing projects, and so on.
So I think for me, it's also like, I have to put that in context of why I moved back. The reason why I left San Francisco, even though the money is incredible, but the problem for me was all the ecology, like the fires. For 3 days, I couldn't see the sky. It was raining ashes. The earthquake, you always know that it's gonna come one day. There were also the school shootings, the riots, the police brutality. Especially during the pandemic, there was this exodus. I was stuck in traffic on the highway, and all the other cars were moving trucks of people leaving the city. The price of rent is just insane. And so I was really exhausted of being always triggered, anxious by the news. And it's also like, it's a very fast pace. Like, I was going to several conferences a year, like big ones, like the Dreamforce, Google I/O, Google Next, Spark Summit. It never stops. And I was doing talks as well, so it's like nonstop. You have to go from conference to conference. It's an exhausting life, even though it's rewarding financially. That's pretty much the only reward you get. I also have diabetes type 1, and so I need insulin. And even though I'm lucky, I'm an engineer. You never get out of job. There's like 17 jobs for each engineer, and the 16 will never find any position, anybody. You always have these fears that if you get fired, if you can't work, if something happens, you're dead. You won't be able to get. I tried to get health insurance on my own. I got denied because I have pre-existing condition. So you have to go through a company. You never have the option of being free of work. And so I was looking for countries to move to that will be more peaceful. And I looked at several countries, and when I read more about Luxembourg, I was like, oh, it sounds amazing. It's like so peaceful. There's like people were like, but this is boring. Like that's exactly what I want. It's like I read the news. It's about traffic jam instead of people shooting each other, and it's amazing. And the other advantage of being European is that you get to work on so many different topics. There's people working on ecology, people working on I don't know, like crazy innovations. There's like things happening all over, and each countries have different culture, different specialization. It's so much more fulfilling to work in Europe to me after working in this like Silicon Valley where everybody you talk to is an engineer. Here I met lawyers and people that works in doctors, and like there's like so many different fields. And it's there's seasons, like the sky is not always blue every single day. There's like rains and clouds, and it's you have the sunset is beautiful when you have clouds on it. So it's really about like and going to the pharmacy, being able to pick up insulin is freeing. So I slept much better here. And I'm always surprised about things I read about Luxembourg, like about asteroid mining. I went to the EDIH conference and the prime minister was at the keynote. It's like, it's amazing to see the government involved into innovation and making a better world. I see all the highways in construction. I see the tramway in construction. There's like so much things happening. It's compared to, I feel like in Silicon Valley, I think people have kind of like rely on their already acquired things. And they're like, okay, we just keep growing. There's no, and because of the ecosystem, as soon as there is a new exciting company, it gets sucked in Google, acquired by Facebook, and it disappears. So it's pretty fun to be here where there's like all this ecosystem being bubbling. It feels like being back at the beginning of Silicon Valley, where everything is exciting, everybody's like starting new things. And so that's why I decided to go back. I think it's really cool to be here now.
Very much. And the last one, just to finish off, is if you had a crystal ball, I mean, as I said, spring is coming, Easter, or what you call it, is coming, and you had a crystal ball, what would you recommend or like to see happening here in Luxembourg or in Europe, or what would be an advice that you would give to budding entrepreneurs or companies and so?
Mm-hmm. I think, the goal of my company, Pure Lambda, it's in if you go to the About page, there's like this goal for me. It's to create this GMT 0 to 3 decentralized Silicon Valley. It's like, because we are all on the same time zone between Europe and Africa, we could have these gigantic pillars of the world that is like driving innovation. And I think because of the cultures in those time zones about like doing great things, but doing it the right way, with like regulations, and we respect people. We have like, we don't exploit our workforce. The goal is to grow together. I think we can do great things, and I want to be part of that. For instance, we could refocus on like manufacturing in Europe with like automation and machine learning and AI. We could have like, I imagine this like factory, it's like Amazon. You just press a button, it manufacture it and ship it with drones. Imagine, that would be crazy. There's no warehouse. And I think, having the small landmass of Europe is an asset. We can have like indoor agriculture like they do in the Netherlands. We could have like no warehouse manufacturing processes. There's like so many things we can do, and I want to be part of it.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you for sharing with us your experiences and as well the outlook you are looking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.